The unseen passenger. The train left the station just before midnight. Snow fell heavily, thick white sheets drifting past the windows as the engine pulled the long line of cars into the dark countryside. The storm had already canceled several departures, and this was one of the last trains allowed to travel through the mountains before the tracks closed completely. That was why the train was nearly empty. Only a handful of passengers had boarded. They were scattered across different cars, their shapes briefly visible through frosted windows before the train began to move. The platform lights faded, and the world outside turned into darkness and snow. The traveler sat alone in a small compartment near the middle of the train. The seat was narrow but clean. A small table was folded against the wall. A window showed nothing but white wind and black night. The traveler placed a bag on the seat, removed a coat, and let out a slow breath. This journey was supposed to be quiet. That was the reason for taking the overnight train instead of a flight. Silence. Time to think. Time to rest. The door to the compartment was closed and locked. The hallway outside was silent except for the distant hum of the engine and the soft rattle of wheels on frozen tracks. For a while, everything felt normal. An hour passed. The train moved deeper into the mountains. Snow piled higher along the tracks, glowing faintly under the train's exterior lights. Inside, the lamps gave off a dull yellow glow, steady and warm. The traveler leaned back and closed their eyes. That was when the first thing appeared. A small object rested on the table. The traveler frowned and sat up straight. It was a locket, old, tarnished silver, the surface scratched with age. It lay perfectly centered on the table, as if placed there carefully. The traveler was certain the table had been empty. They picked up the locket. It was cold, unnaturally cold, as if it had been left outside in the snow. There was no sound from the hallway, no footsteps, no voices. The traveler opened the compartment door and looked out. The hallway was empty. They checked the nearby compartments. Doors closed. No movement. Someone must have left it by mistake, the traveler thought. They placed the locket back on the table and locked the door again. The train continued forward. Not long after, the lights flickered. Once, twice. Then they returned to normal. The traveler looked up, suddenly alert. A faint sound reached their ears. It was soft, so soft it could have been the wind, almost like whispering. The traveler held their breath. The sound came again, from the next compartment. They pressed their ear against the wall. The whispering stopped. Silence returned, thick and heavy. The traveler stepped back and shook their head. Old trains make noise, they told themselves. But when they turned back to the table, the locket was gone. In its place lay a single black feather. The night stretched on. The train no longer slowed for stations. It passed through them without stopping. Empty platforms buried in snow, lights flickering uselessly against the storm. The traveler began to feel cold. Not the normal cold of winter air. This was sudden, sharp, localized. One corner of the compartment felt like standing outside. They wrapped their coat tighter and rubbed their hands together. The lights flickered again. This time they stayed dim. A sound echoed through the car. A dragging noise, slow, heavy, like something being pulled along the floor. It moved down the hallway, passing the compartment. The traveler stood frozen, staring at the door. The sound stopped directly outside. A shadow passed beneath the doorframe. The handle did not move. After several long seconds, the dragging resumed and faded into the distance. When the traveler opened the door, the hallway was empty again. But something new lay on the floor just inside the compartment. A child's toy, a small, worn wooden horse, its paint chipped and faded. The traveler's heart began to race. They left the compartment. The hallway felt longer than before. The lights above buzzed faintly, some dimmer than others. Frost clung to the edges of the windows. They walked toward the next car. The door between cars was open. Inside, rows of seats stretched out, all empty. No bags, No coats, no signs anyone had ever been there. The traveler clearly remembered seeing someone earlier. A man reading near the window, a woman sleeping with her head against the glass. Now there was nothing. They moved forward through another car. Empty. Another. Empty. A sense of pressure built in their chest. They reached the dining car. The lights were on, but the counter was unattended. Plates sat half-cleaned. A cup of coffee still steamed faintly, untouched. The traveler called out. No answer. They hurried toward the front of the train. The conductor's compartment door stood open. Inside, the chair was empty. The radio hissed softly with static. The traveler backed away. Something brushed past them. They spun around. Nothing was there. But in the window reflection, just for a moment, a figure stood behind them. Tall, thin, featureless. It vanished when they turned fully. Panic began to set in. The traveler ran back toward their compartment. The train felt wrong now. The sounds were too loud. The silence between them too deep. Every step echoed longer than it should. As they passed another car, they noticed frost forming on the inside of the windows, creeping outward like veins. Whispers filled the air. Not words, just breath, broken sounds. The traveler slammed the compartment door shut and locked it. The lights went out. Complete darkness. The cold rushed in like a wave. The traveler hugged their knees and waited. Then the lights came back on. Dimmer than before. The compartment looked the same. Almost. The table was gone. In its place stood an extra seat. Old, torn fabric. Stained. A seat that had not been there before. The traveler backed against the wall. The unseen passenger was closer now. They could feel it. Time lost meaning. The train did not slow. It did not stop. The traveler dozed and woke again, always to the same darkness and flickering light. Each time they woke, something else had changed. A window sealed shut with ice. A door that would not open. A reflection that moved a second too late. Finally, the whispers became clear. You're still here. The traveler pressed their hands over their ears. The temperature dropped again. The unseen passenger revealed itself not in full form, but in presence. Everywhere at once. The traveler remembered something then. An old news story. A train. A blizzard. A derailment decades ago. Passengers trapped overnight. Some never found. The train never reached its destination. The spirit was not chasing them. It was traveling with them, reliving the journey, over and over. The traveler screamed as the realization set in. Morning would never come. The train was stuck in its own past. And now, so were they. Outside, snow continued to fall. Inside, the unseen passenger waited. The lights flickered one last time. The train moved forward. Forever.